Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is a show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. Now, before we begin, because in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining the information of underage users, therefore violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, also known as COPPA, they implemented new policy meant to scapegoat creators and dodge responsibility, meaning I have to ensure that everyone understands that this video is not meant for children. It's not marketed towards kids, it's not advertised towards kids. Doctor Who is a family show that kids can watch, but this video, as with all of the videos on my channel, are looking at it from an adult perspective, and therefore will be potentially be discussing adult themes. So viewer discretion is advised. That out of the way, it's the 10th of February 2021, and we are starting a look at Wicked Sisters, an interesting box set with 3 hour-long episodes set after the Key to Time with Abby and Zara, and set after the 4th series of Graceless. But it's a Doctor Who release, mainly because we focus on the Doctor. All stories have been written by Simon Garrier. We're starting today with The Garden of Storms, the first episode, which sets up this trilogy of stories really nicely. The Garden of Storms it basically sets us up as some point after the Key to Time, the Doctor, after avoiding Leela from Gallifrey for a long time, is essentially tasked with Leela to go hunt down the Graceless sisters. The Doctor, of course, doesn't want to do this because, well, they're obviously, not bad people. They clearly care about one another. They're normal people, as the cast pool indicates, but something about them has changed. Mainly that they've kind of totally lost their way in a lot of ways. Well, not lost their way, but they have been interfering and using their powers to interfere and to quote-unquote make things better. This story takes place on a planet where their interference is causing very big problems. And by that I mean, well, it's 2 characters who are essentially in search of trying to find their own ending, and sadly not entirely fixing things like they should. The planet seems to be a pleasure planet where, well, the big idea is that once you reach age 40, the economy kills you. The economy, they take you out and they terminate you, which is kind of which is already a very, very dark, a very, very dark story, and a dark idea. Of course, the Doctor, would usually come in and try to interfere, and what makes it more interesting is that Abby and Zara can realize they can only interfere so much. They can't force them, or else they would lose their free will to change their minds, but they can try to nudge them in the correct direction, in the idea that, okay, maybe just that subtle nudge will get them what they need to essentially change their ways, make a better decision about the world, and find a way to keep living and not dying, and not end up killing these, not end up, dealing with these people, and causing it to be a problem. And the entire story is also built around that, plus the fact that there are these very, very these very, very different smoke creatures that seem to be causing problems, and a lot of the story kind of plays out like a comedy. Simon Guerrier's script is mostly set at a party, with Abby and Zara being the ones trying to get the Doctor and Leela to do things. And Leela is interesting because Louise Jameson plays her very hardened, very, very much older than the character that we know from the Invasion of Time, but enough where you get the sense that, Leela is at a point where she would be killed on this planet, and of course some of the absurdism comes when the ages of the Doctor, Abby and Zara, are taken, and it's nearly 900, and then over thousands of years old. Something, it's kind of an over-the-top number, and not necessarily what you were expecting, but it is, it is a number, and it's something that you would know. Like, the Doctor would be very old. It's a very different sort of story because of how weird it wants to be, and how odd they play this very different this very, very different plot. The smoke creatures are also great, and we also build up to a cliffhanger. So the resolution ends. They eventually kind of realize the error of their ways. And that's our resolution to the story, which is good. It's a very good resolution, and it makes sense that is where you would kind of want to go. But that doesn't mean it's a perfect story by any means. A lot of the story is exposition, and it does seem to be a lot of setting up, the rest of this, the rest of this plot and the rest of these things, which, yeah, I can understand wanting that. I get it. It makes sense to want something like that. And I've, seen stories like this before, where you do these sort of big reveals and big things, and I do enjoy it a lot, even if it's not perfectly. You have the character of Zeeb, who is this, over the top woman who's just ready to die with dignity, which is an interesting idea. Is it really dying with dignity if you're just being forced to be killed at the age of 40? It's a very very different sort of thing where you have it built up around the idea of these characters. Peter Davison is great. Louise Jameson is great. Keira Johnson and Laura Donington also play their roles as developed. Coming right off the Chaos Pool, you can really see that development of their characters, being different from what you saw in the Chaos Pool and in the Heat of Time trilogy. So you really do get that as as a starting point for who these characters are. So overall, I'm going to have to give The Garden of Storms an 8 out of 10. Okay, it is the 11th of February 2021. I just finished listening to The Moonrakers, the second story in Wicked Sisters, and the middle one. This is important because we move from, The Garden of Storms into a story set on the Earth's moon. Not really with the smoke creatures, mainly because the smoke creatures are tied to Abby and Zara's powers being used, and they can't be used when Abby and Zara are apart from one another. That's just kind of how this entire these characters work. And for a lot of the Moonrakers, Abby and Zara are apart from each other, which creates a very interesting dynamic. Zara's with the Doctor, and Abby is with Leela. Abby, in particular, played by Sarah Johnson, has essentially an arc where she's dealing with the fact that she's not with her sister right now, and that kind of breaks her in a way. What I mean by that is because of the twins not ever being apart a lot beforehand, the idea of them being together is sort of their characters. They come as a group. The idea of the parting them would essentially, the idea is that it would cause Zara to go insane. Now, in the Moonrakers, it doesn't actually do that. Especially because the Moonrakers tells a story in parallel. It has the Doctor and Zara at one point in time, at an earlier point in time, while Leela and Abby are in the future on the moon. And this is the story which is kind of the most promoted on the cover, at least because, well, it's the one with the Centaurans. Now, the Centaurans are essentially all played by Dan Starkey, who, plays the Centauran Strax in the new series, or at least that's what he's most well known for from the new series, or the Centauran he's most well known for, at least. Because, of course, and that's sort of made him the de facto Centauran character for Big Finish, which is fine, actually. Starkey gives a really good performance. And Simon Guerrier's script plays around with the idea of what the Centaurans are here in some very interesting ways. Instead of just being Centaurans, they are on the moon looking for a strategy. They end up letting their human prisoners, if anything, well, they let them build a stone garden. It's this very, very little idea that I really, really like. It's such a different thing because, well, this is, it's playing the characters as something different and mainly being different for everything that goes on. This is a story that actually plays up the warlike elements of the Centaurans and doesn't just use them for comedy. Using them for comedy is something that the new series, that the classic series kind of did in the Invasion of Time and will do in the Six Doctors era, kind of, a little bit. But the new series did it more often by, throughout the Moffat era, the only Centauran we ever really saw was Strax, and he was always the butt of every joke, which wasn't actually great for his character. It made him genuinely quite annoying because, well, with Strax, you were just like, oh, we're getting comedy Centauran bits instead of actually allowing the Centaurans to be interesting characters. So you have, everything that this story wants to be, is dealing with creating this rock garden. The Doctor and Zara are thought to be, are thought to essentially be, altered humans, which is already that's already an interesting plot. You have that built up over the course of the episode to the reveal when Leela and Abby find them, and they are in stasis and have essentially been brainwashed into being Centaurans, or at least that's what they're led to believe. Of course, because this is Doctor Who, that isn't actually what happens, which is another interesting piece of the story is that you have something, you have this very different sort of plot built around the Doctor and Zara saving the day like this, and it's a plot where you realize that this episode in general is sort of meant to be the bridge episode. It's meant to connect the two ideas, because while throughout this episode, Leela starts to really come around to the idea of Abby and Zara at least being allowed to live. Because you have to remember, the premise of this entire set is Gallifrey wants Abby and Zara destroyed because they are too powerful. And, this is an episode where the Doctor ends up changing history. And we end with them, oh, well, let's go find out to see how drastic said changes actually are, and if those changes are just as bad. And it's something that wants to confront this is an entire set that wants to confront the idea of, can the Doctor actually change history? Is that something that he's allowed to do, or is he essentially trapped in keeping history as it is, or as it was? It's definitely an interesting question, especially because, well, this is the Fifth Doctor, and you really get to see that here. It makes this story feel all the more interesting when you as you sort of think about, okay, what are the implications? Why what is the Doctor really trying to do? Why are we trying to do this? Where can we go from here? All in a way to just build things towards our third episode and our big conclusion of this story, which I think is really quite smart. Also, the Sontaran characters are very fun, as they are kind of played incompetently. They're easily manipulated by the Doctor. The Doctor being able to manipulate Sontarans is very interesting, because you wouldn't necessarily think it's something that this Doctor in particular would do, but once you get to it, it kind of makes sense. The Doctor is trying to survive, and essentially teaches Sontarans the value in life, which is just kind of this fascinating idea of, okay, Sontarans now understand the value of life. Where can we, what can we do with that? And it's the idea of changing history, all coming down to a title that's taken from a James Bond novel. Obviously, Moonraker is a Bond book and film that with Roger Moore. I've never actually seen it, but it's an interesting title because you have actually, in this story, you literally have people raking the moon. So it kind of does what it says on the tin, but it does it really, really well. Again, a lot of it's because a lot of it is because of how well Simon Guerrier understands these characters, and Lisa Bowerman's direction is nothing to laugh at either. She always gives a very, very good good outing as director. So overall, I'm going to have to give The Moonrakers a 10 out of 10. It is the 12th of February, 2021. I just finished listening to The People Made of Smoke, the final episode in Wicked Sisters. And the episode where the Doctor and Leela go back to the moon colony in the future to find it actually changed for the better. Which is actually kind of an interesting take. This, mainly because, well, Doctor Who is a story where, Doctor is a concept, rather, generally goes for, goes through the idea that that this story of wanting to change history will end in disaster. It'll end badly. It'll only make things worse, and couldn't make things better. Simon Guerrier decides that at least in this one, and it's implied that whenever the Doctor actually changes history by having any sort of adventure, because basically every time he steps out of the TARDIS, history gets altered in some way. Well, that change causes the the idea of basically being a story of trying to figure out how to resolve conflict. That's what this entire story kind of is. It's one of those very different sort of things where the story goes to find that all these people are still happy. Now, of course, we still have to resolve the stuff with this people made of smoke. Heck, that's what this episode is called, because you have people made of smoke. And having people made of smoke essentially means that you get everything going on. It's this whole idea where people start dying on this possibly perfect new life that they have. They have a life, but now they're dying, and that's where sort of the sadness comes in. You don't see everything that it's sort of meant to be, but you see things from this different perspective, where the entire story you get to see this very, you see, first the Doctor, everyone is sort of investigating a murder. You get to see Zeb from the first episode back happy. You see people age. A lot of really sort of bleak concepts that sort of go into one another, and it creates just this whole idea of being a very weird sort of thing. You don't you don't get to see where everything ends, but you see something so different, sort of a different sort of story where you don't have the story be that perfect story, but you get something so much better and so sort of different, because of this murder investigation. You see people sort of living their lives, and eventually we have just the fact that we have sort of Leela realize, okay, the Graceless twins should be allowed to live in every sense of the word. That makes sense, but you also have them giving up their power to save the Doctor, who regenerates here. The fifth Doctor regenerates into an alternate sixth Doctor, played by Dan Starkey, which is kind of an interesting sort of idea, because that is what this story does, is it plays around with the ideas, and I love seeing this alternate sixth Doctor for a few moments, because the idea is that this only gives Five a little more life, and he doesn't ever actually experience this. We pick back up with him seeing Leela for the first time as the Graceless sisters find their way back, and he eventually does find them. But the idea is that he is definitely about to die, and that is just fascinating. The Dan Starkey's alternate six is perhaps a bit on the nose, and especially a bit weird, considering that after this episode, after this is the last chronological audio for the fifth Doctor, and one of the most recent Big Finish releases, literally bar a couple of main range stories. But yeah, it's a really, really good story. So I'm gonna have to give The People Made of Smoke a 9 out of 10. That being said, we added the scores and averaged them out to give Wicked Sisters a final score of 9 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss an upload. And join me next time where Peter Davison has one final televised story, and we get one final outing with the fifth Doctor in Doctor Who, The Caves of ANDROZANI.